everyone, and welcome to Anti-Life Reviews. I'm, of course, the Tony Micaiah, Master of Minds and of Men. We end our trip to the depraved world of martial law, what might be the most interesting comics since the first mini, as we look at one self-contained story in Secret Tribunal, which was published September 1993 to April 1994 by Dark Horse, and then two crossover events with the Marshal, the first being Marshal Law versus Pinhead, Hellraiser, which was published November to December of 1993 by the Epic imprint of Marvel, and Marshal Law versus The Mask, which was published February to March 1998 by Dark Horse Comics. Some very interesting meetings there. So hit that subscribe button and let's find out how they go, or how they went, I guess. Writers and artists on this, writer and co-creator Pat Mills, from Judge Dredd, whom he had a hand in creating, to Doctor Who, to Doctor Doom. He has had a wide and varied career and certainly understands the humor can be seen in the violent nature of comics, maybe better than almost anyone else. A staple of British comics in 2000 AD for years and years, and is also inexplicably a children's writer. Fellow co-creator and a man who recently passed, Kevin O'Neill, most and probably rightfully known for his work with Alan Moore on the long-running but now completed League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, where he puts his ability on a full display. Artist who really had no parallels in a lot of ways, had the ability to create horrors that really are something straight out of a Lovecraft's imagination. Starting off with Secret Tribunal, we begin with the League of Heroes, a pastiche of the Legion of Superheroes led by the young public spirit who we saw dispatched in the first mini. And they are going to check out an abandoned spaceship, and they find, for legal reasons, totally not xenomorphs from the Alien franchise, but for narrative purposes, 100% exactly that. Horror ensues. Meanwhile, Marshal Law has been corralled by his boss and taking over a team called the Secret Tribunal, who are an X-Force parody. Their job, go help the League of Heroes. Of course, we get some interesting dynamic between the Marshal and the young public spirit, which we'll talk about more later. Mostly we get lots of alien killing until Marshal Law declares he's in charge and he's going to handle things his way. Well, he actually says the ship is under martial law, which is cool. Okay, I give him that. We get lots about how big a piece of shit the public spirit is, while the Marshal and the Boom Boom character have relations, which is not good. Then aliens attack, the Secret Tribunal decide to leave the League to die, but Marshal Law insists it is not happening, and with big help from growing boy, the day is saved and the alien queen is killed. Marshal Law and Pinhead. The Marshal has a girlfriend, a new one, of course, since the last one is dead, a metahuman named Supernova who has daddy issues galore and has been astral projecting to meet with the Cenobites. Well, this leads to a giant superhero, they call it a therapy session, but it's clearly a sex club. And what do you know? They have a lament configuration. It's opened, Marshal Law, Supernova, and other metahumans go in. Of course, this other metahuman works for the Cenobites, and the Marshal and Gal Pal are attacked by various Cenobites, including a Scissor Man one and a Dinosaur Man one, until the Marshal finally meets Pinhead, where he promptly punches him in the face. Pinhead tries to get the Marshal to join the Cenobites and their leader Leviathan. Of course, the Marshal rejects this, and we get an extended battle with the Cenobites. But the battle isn't alone, as the metahumans outside, along with Marshal Law's sidekick, Razorhead, join in as they enter into hell. But after some back and forth, Pinhead and Marshal Law agree they are more alike than different, especially in their hatred of superheroes, and they go their separate ways. The Marshal then breaks up a Supernova, and an orgy commences. All right. Marshal Law and the Mask. Marshal is retiring. He doesn't care about superheroes anymore. He doesn't hate them. He's bored. All the real challenges are dead and gone. He's training his successor, the oversexed Gale Force. They also have a fling going, of course. Meanwhile, we see Danny, the former Sleep Man, still wildly brain damaged from the first mini, still being experimented on by the government. What is their current experiment? Well, they have a mask, and for vague enough reasons are going to test it on this hyper-powered psycho. And what do you know? It goes tits up, as we've seen what a regular person can do with the mask, but with the power of the Sleep Man exemplified it many times fold. Finding out the Sleep Man has returned gives Marshal Law a renewed sense of fight in him. Him and Gale begin going to war against the Sleep Man, or the Sleep Mask, I guess he should be now, who was just tearing up the city in a futile event to prove he is not just germs, he is a hero. Eventually, though, after a prolonged fight, Danny removes the mask, and he seems to be restored to his sanity, but he's beaten up by the Marshal and arrested. In the end, Marshal Law volunteers to put the mask on and become his inner self, ready for ultra-violence once again. So let's talk about these. Starting with Secret Tribunal. Let's get this out of the way first. This was supposed to be martial law versus aliens. Clearly, it was designed that way in every conceivable fashion. Due to some kind of following through with the rights owners in the negotiations, it became this. The art on this was fantastic, but disappointing in the same way, and I'll get to why. But let me go over the good. The parody stuff. The Golden Age look of the League was really well done. It had that Legion look, multicolored, broad-shouldered bad costumes and bad names like Super Sensitive Girl, Camouflage Kid, and Growing Boy. Not only that, but the X-Force parody was even better. It was life-filled to a T, except Kevin can draw feet. Quite literally, the Boom Boom character has pockets as the only thing covering her breasts, and Marshal Law says about them in general. Their costumes are so tight you can see if they've been circumcised. Just generally excellent parody work, as well as the not legally xenomorphs. They were awesome, horrifying, disturbing, crazed. The gore we got was so visceral and wonderful, honestly. But we got so little of it. I don't know if it was for reasons that they didn't want to show the aliens, as they were kind of slightly but not really resembling the xenomorphs, so they didn't want to test that legal boundary, some other reason, but we saw very little of them, and it was a disappointment to me. I understand the tension of not seeing the aliens in a movie, but here, it's martial law. Aren't we past that? Now, onto the writing, and this is where things get a little more complicated. I've been rather open about my feelings on Pat's opinion, moreover, his handling of his own opinion in his writings, and honestly, that's not a problem here. His ability to lace satire while abusing the superhero genre was rather well done. In fact, we actually get some nice continuity here with Marshal Law saving the public spirit when he was young, talking about how they have a shared history and a few other little bits. The criticism of the sexual repression of the Legion-era comics as well, as Liefeld's 90s heroes was well crafted, if not slightly low-hanging fruit. We even get Marshal Law having some character, which is welcome, as those tend to be the most interesting stories, and that's no change here. But, and this is something I've not talked about before, because it was only really prevalent in the first mini, and it was used there in a way that at least made sense for the motives of the Sleep Man. But there is some sex here, fine, but it lends itself to a part about SA, and it's handled really poorly. Marshal Law and the Boom Boom character sleep together. She talks about how it reminds her of the essay she suffered, and then it's kind of dismissed and not mentioned again. It comes off as a really poor handling of the subject matter. I've been critical of essay and media used as a plot device, both when it can be appropriate and how often it isn't. It isn't here, and it takes several pages away from the story. It's about Marshal Law fighting not xenomorphs. So let's move on from that. Marshal Law versus Pinhead. Art here, start with the bad here. The coloring. The coloring is way off here. It's very messy. Almost sloppy, and it's a little bit distracting. I expect if you're not super familiar with previous volumes of Marshal Law, you might not care. Though I wonder what you would be doing picking up this comic, as it's incredibly niche. Now, beyond that, everything else is pretty damn good. We get some really varied Cenobite designs, from lackluster to incredibly disturbing, and I'm totally fine with that mixture. Kevin throws a lot of them out there. They're kind of treated just like regular demons, which I'm not sure was ever the intent, but it doesn't matter. The metahumans are your standard fare we've come to expect. Let's be honest, everyone was coming into this one to see the disturbing Cenobites, and that delivered. Pinhead also looks adequately scary, and Marshal Law was more than imposing. Lots of gore, lots of fights, just lots of what I wanted to see in this comic. As far as the writing, this story hinged entirely on the art, to be honest, as the writing was mediocre, and I say that at best. Marshal Law having a new girlfriend seems so out of character after the Lynn thing. Hell, he barely even mentions her, if at all, and her being a metahuman? That's very odd. He hates metahumans. Him hanging out with metahumans is even more strange. Said he hates them. That's like his only real defining character trait. I hate metahumans. She was a bland, utterly useless character, and they could have easily been tons of ways to get a lament configuration of Marshal Law. He's actually the kind of person the Cenobites would search out, a sadomasochist of the highest order. Beyond that, we get lots of exposition about the zone, and a lot of hero worship of dead World War I soldiers for Pinhead's backstory. We saw this in Super Babylon as well, an exceptional amount of hero worship for soldiers. It sort of flies in the face of some of Pat's political beliefs. It comes off as slightly odd. This was a visual experience that had a story that could have been stripped down, to be frank. Moving over to Marshal Law and the Mask. Art, Will Baby. Now this is Kevin at his best. This reminds me of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen level of goodness he would do the very next year, actually. He started on that, on the League. And man, works perfectly. It's a little bit less visceral, a little bit less over the top, but still exaggerated in the appropriate amount for the nature of the story. The coloring is above par, has this level of sheen and shadow to it that make it satisfying to look at. The mask stuff is where this shines, as he goes as crazy as possible with it and captures the feel I think John Arcudi, the original mask creator, would be happy to see. The Marshal looks fairly standard, though his masked persona at the end was a lot of fun. And Gale looks like a pretty generic, oversexed blonde metahuman. A little disappointing there. But we never really see her, or frankly anyone else from this again, so it doesn't really matter. The writing on this, it was nice to see Marshal Law's final showdown be against the Sleep Man, his original villain. Comic-wise, at least. Even if the actual resolution was slightly messy, it seems the reason we haven't gotten any more Marshals due to Kevin's extended work with Alan Moore, and now his passing, of course, will render that totally moot. More notably on the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which I'm sure he got plenty of notoriety on as well as money. It's mentioned in the letters in the back that this is the reason for the hiatus, but Pat talks about the Marshal coming back. We know that's not going to happen. So this was pretty much the end of Marshal Law. It was an alright ending. It seems slightly phoned in, with no real beats, save let's have him face a Sleep Man again, and was left on kind of a cliffhanger. Overall, this has been pretty much the complete Marshal Law, honestly. I think I left out him and Savage Dragon because I don't like Savage Dragon. I'm not going to read that. It was a wild ride. It certainly was violent, explosive, had lots to say about the medium of comics, the nature of morality, capitalism, war, and lots more. Now, it had an interesting way of expressing those feelings. Some of them were through the usually ridiculous and fun art. Some of it was through a subtle weaving of character stories and a narrative. Some of it was just yelling at the reader while pelting them with ideals. Not all of these are effective strategies, but that's Marshal Law. It's aggressive, it's slightly mean-spirited, it's a confusing take on the superhero genre, and its message, while being told one thing, doesn't always appear to be that thing. It wants to glorify violence, to make money from the violence, all the while decrying superhero comics for glorifying violence and capitalism for making money off of it. I get the point. By the time you are doing crossovers with established franchises, you've kind of lost your way of telling an anti-capitalist story when those are easy ways to draw some money to you. That's not that I don't think Pat believes what he says. I also think maybe Marshal Law should have stayed the first 6-issue mini, and the point he was trying to get across might have been a little more poignant. Well, that was the almost complete and total Marshal Law. Would you like to see more Marshal Law? What artists do you think could do justice to the franchise now that Kevin O'Neill is gone? Let me know down below. Also, hit that subscribe button. Check out my Patreon. We can support for as little as $1. Come back next week where I'm going to be starting my December stuff. I know probably be in the second week of December, but I'm going to be looking at the Marvel Holiday comics, holiday special that they published for a couple of years. So I'm interested to check those out. Also, please add me on Instagram, and also, have a great day. And thank you very much from Vito Makai, a master of minds and of men. Sorry about this exit. I had one written, but I had to ad-lib this one because everything in it is now incorrect.